Welcome, everybody. We're so glad that you're here with us. My name is Lori McClure. I'm your online Bible study leader, and I'm so excited that our new friend, Melanie Shankle, is here with us today. She's the author of our new online Bible study and the book, Church of the Small Things. Melanie, we're so glad to have you with us. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. I'm just so excited about the whole thing and the online Bible study and all of it. So this is super fun.
You know what? We have absolutely loved reading your book and digging into the materials already. Just so you guys know, go get your stuff. store.faithgateway.com. You can, with the code Small Things, you guys can save $4 off your study guide and everything that you need for the study. So go ahead and do that really fast if you haven't already. Melanie, this has been so much fun. Would you, before we even get started, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your family?
Yes. So my name's Melanie Shankle. I live in San Antonio, Texas. I've been married to my husband, Perry, for 20 years. We have one child. She's a girl. She's 14. Her name's Caroline. So this is her freshman year of high school. So we're figuring all that out. And then we have two dogs, Piper and Mabel, that I write a lot about in my books. And I feel like they give me some sort of spiritual lesson every day. And that's it. And so I write full time. And in my spare time, I basically drive soccer carpool is what I do.
I love it. I love that you're just a normal mom like us.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, for those of us who are moms. But tell us, how did you get started doing Big Mama Blog?
I started the blog. It's so funny to me now the way God puts all these little pieces together, because at the time, I started it in July of 2006. At the time, I was in full-time pharmaceutical sales. My daughter, Caroline, was not quite 3. And I just really wanted a creative outlet. I was so busy being a mom, and I had this corporate job, and I just thought, I want to write. Like, I'd always loved to write. And I was like, I want to get back to that. And, you know, for those of you that are moms, my daughter was at that age where she was saying funny stuff all the time, and she was doing funny stuff all the time. And it just felt like there were so many memories that I wanted to capture. And so late one night on July 5th, 2006, I went to blogger.com and I opened up this blog. I called it Big Mama, which now I'm like, had I known it was going to be something that lasted this long, I probably would have rethought the name. But at the time, I called it Big Mama because Caroline wasn't quite 3. And so we were teaching her how to be potty trained. And we were trying to get rid of her pacifier because I'd been lying to the pediatrician for like 2 years saying, oh yeah, she's totally done with the pacifier. And so I started calling her Big Girl all the time. I'd be like, you're a big girl now, you're a big girl. And she started calling me Big Mama, which is how the blog name came. And I was like, oh, that's funny, I'll call it Big Mama. And that's it. And it just became my place where every night I would get her in bed, and it just kind of became my little creative space where I would go and kind of write either what happened that day or a funny story or just whatever came to mind.
I love it. That's such a great story. All right. So what was your inspiration for writing Church of the Small Things?
You know, I had written 3 books previous to Church of the Small Things, and one was on motherhood, and one was on marriage, and one was on friendship. And I felt like those made sense to me because those are like the 3 most important components of my life. I mean, of course, my faith is like the umbrella over all of those, but those are really the 3 most important things in my life. And so as I started to write Church of Small Things, I didn't know what it was going to be. Like I knew I wanted to write a 4th book, and I knew I had different stories and things on my heart, but I didn't know what the framework was going to be. And when I wrote an essay about my grandparents, which became the 2nd chapter of the book, it just really dawned on me that I thought, you know, I feel all this pressure and put all this pressure on myself that I'm supposed to be doing these big, amazing things all the time. And like, is it enough to drive carpool and to cook chicken for dinner and, you know, just live a life and to be fulfilled in that? Or am I supposed to be doing more? It feels like when you look on social media, it feels like there's all these people doing amazing things. And when I went back to that essay with my grandparents, I thought they really were such an example of what kind of a legacy you leave when you just do the faithful thing day in and day out. Like, it wasn't glamorous, and they weren't trying hard. They were just loving their family. They were loving their community. They were loving the people around them. And so as I watched it, I was like, this is the small things. Like, that's what I believe in. And I was like, I'm like a poster child for the small things, because that's what I love, is my home and my family and my neighborhood and my community. And so that really became, at that point, I knew that was going to be the overarching theme of the next book.
I'm so glad that you wrote this, honestly, because I love the subtitle, Making a Difference Right Where You Are.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think so many people in particularly our culture with so much social media really feel like our lives are small and they don't matter. And you're right, like other people are doing these big and fantastic things. And if we're going to matter in the kingdom of God, we've got to do we've got to launch something big or do something big. And it feels like debilitating. Like, well, I can only do this. I can only do this that I'm doing right now. And we feel like we're not enough.
Yeah.
So what do you say to someone who really wants to do something big and is feeling that inadequacy?
I think here's what I really believe more and more, and the older I get, and I've had to come, I feel like every lesson you learn or everything that you feel like you can speak on is something that, like, to me has been the big struggle of your life. It becomes what God has taught you through that. And that's what equips you to be able to speak into it a little bit, is because I have struggled with those same feelings. I just think that there's a reason when you look over the span of time, and that God is God, and that he could put you in any time and in any generation. And I always say, I'm so glad that he put me in a generation that had like electricity and air conditioning and all of that. But you look and think, he specifically he could have put you anywhere in the world, but he put you in your community, in your family. He gave you your kids and the schools that you're in and the office that you're in or the classroom that you're in. And I believe that that's so intentional on his part. So it can feel small to us, but I think that we have to look and go, God wouldn't have put me here if he didn't believe that I could make a difference right where I am. And I feel like a thought that kept coming to mind even after I wrote the Bible study was, I thought, Jesus could have come at any time. Like, God could have said, you know what, we're going to wait so he can be like Facebook Live. Like, that's the way we're going to go with Jesus, so we can have an Instagram Live about, here he is, the Savior. But I thought, what he did was, they put him in this time where he just influenced these 12 men in his community. There was no social media. And you look and you think that changed the world. And that was just him pouring into the lives of others around him. And so I think sometimes I wonder, why do we struggle with believing that he can't do the same thing through us?
Mm-hmm. I love how you were sharing just like your story in the grocery store of seeing a mom who's struggling and speaking out to her, which you guys will get into in session 1. But I think sometimes it might be confusing for someone who's just feeling down to know how is it that we can be faithful in the small things? What does it look like to be faithful in the small things? Like, how do I do that in my daily life? I don't want to just puff myself up and say I'm doing a great job, but at the things that I'm doing. But how do we look at our lives and look closely at how to serve the Lord faithfully in our day-to-day normal life?
And I think the answer, Lori, is, to me, that's going to look different every day. To me, I wake up in the morning and if I'm my best self that morning, before my feet hit the floor, I'm like, God, just lead me where you want me to go today. Like, just show me where I can make a difference today. And some days, at the end of the day, let's be honest, some days you're like, I didn't look like much. I'm going to be honest. That was just me living my life. And I don't know that I impacted anybody's life. I don't know that I did anything. If anything, maybe I did the opposite, and I kicked the dog and yelled at my daughter and, wasn't patient, and we ran out of toilet paper, and life is a train wreck, But I also think that when you go through your day with that heart, you never know the opportunities that God is going to put in front of you. And I also think that sometimes, the thing about, especially if you're in motherhood and parenting and all of that, is it's really much later that your kids come back and go, oh, wow, I didn't realize, in that moment. Maybe you have a kid that's like, thank you for packing my lunch today, Mom. That was awesome. But most of the time, that is not going to be the case. And so, I just feel like it's trusting that God is going to use you when you're seeking him, and he's not going to let you miss the big things that he has for you, but he's also going to equip you in the small things. And that doesn't mean that it's always going to look easy and that it's always going to feel fulfilling and that it's always going to bring you joy, because life is just life. And I feel like sometimes the key to content is you have to embrace a little bit of the drudgery of it and just say some days it's monotonous, but that there's a reward and a payoff for staying in it and being faithful in it.
You know, I love that you shared the story of David in the Bible, because one of the things that I didn't even think about was that between him being anointed and him becoming king was a long time, like 20 years. It's a long way. In the meantime, he was just being faithful, being the shepherd. I thought that was such a fantastic point to make. And he was just, I think you said the key word there, which is willing. His heart was one that was submitted to God. So it's the faithfulness and just doing what's right in front of you in order for God to be able to do whatever he can do that we can't do on our own. But how do we wait well?
That's the $1 million question. I don't know. Can you tell me? Can you tell me the answer? You know, I think the waiting is hard. And I think the waiting, and this is what I've always said, is like if you're waiting, like if you're struggling with infertility, or you're waiting on a husband, or you're waiting for whatever that thing is that is in your mind, I think it's so hard. And if somebody could just tell you, you know what, at the end of 10 years, this is going to happen. You're going to have this. You're going to have this baby. You're going to have this husband. You're going to have this thing. But life doesn't work that way. So I think the hard part of waiting is a lot of times we don't even know what we're waiting for. You know, it's like I'm waiting and I don't even know if what I'm waiting for is going to happen. And so there again, I think it goes back to the trusting that God is going to give you the peace and the contentment. And he's teaching you things in that journey. You know, I look back, I mentioned my career in pharmaceutical sales, but I mean, I did that for 12 years. I mean, and it was not because I loved it. It wasn't because I had a passion for pharmaceutical products. It wasn't because I liked waiting in doctor's office waiting rooms. But I look back at that time in my life now and go, God was building things in me that I didn't even realize he was building, in terms of my character, in terms of even just stuff like being able to make a presentation. I mean, which now I use in my writing and speaking life, just all of those little parts where I was like, he was building something that I didn't even know he was building. And I think you have to trust that God always has a purpose in the journey. And so we have to trust him with that, because I think the more we can just rest in him during the journey, the easier that waiting period is. If we know that ultimately that he does promise, and it's in his word, that he works all things together for good. So there's a reason behind it.
So it's really not getting to a place of discouragement during the time where we just seem like we're unseen and invisible in some ways. And in that sense, I love that you shared about the issue of comparison. It's so hard, I think, particularly as women, but maybe I'm wrong and I'm just discounting how hard it is for our guys too, to look at other people's lives that look like they're so put together. They seem like, and they seem like they're forward motion, and they're getting something done, and they're accomplishing so much. And it seems like, oh, ours is just a little bit more messy than that.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about the issue of comparing ourselves with others?
To me, the more comparison is always going to set you up for disappointment. And that's why I try so hard to avoid comparison, because I feel like I've learned a couple of things. Is number one, that it's really easy through Instagram and Facebook to idealize somebody's life, because most people aren't going to put the real stuff on there. They're going to put the highlights. That's what we all do. That's what it's for. You know, it's the vacations, and it's the moments that your kids are actually getting along, and it's the night that you had it together enough to cook a great dinner and you take a picture of it or whatever. It's usually not the day that you're like, my whole life has fallen apart. You know, that's not what you Instagram. Because I think comparison steals our contentment with what we have. And I think that we lose sight of all the things that God has given us and what he has blessed us with when we start looking at somebody else. The other thing I think I've learned about comparison too is you never know the road that somebody else has walked to get to where they are. So, you know, you can look at somebody and go, wow, she has it all together. But you look and you think, I don't know what her childhood was like. I don't know what her marriage is really like inside those four walls. I don't know where her kids are or what's going on with them. And so it's just focusing on your road and knowing that God has given you unique gifts and purposes and things, and it's not going to look like anybody else's. It's not supposed to. But I think it's hard because I think we've never been inundated with so many images of how other people are living. We used to not be able to see inside everybody's house, and now we can. So it's trusting that God is going to give you what you need for your road.
Right. I was thinking about this the other day that, it was like 9 or 10 years ago or so that all of a sudden we're looking at what people are eating for dinner and all of their vacation photos, which it used to be the joke that someone would come home from a vacation and share their slideshow and bore everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
We do it all the time. We're all sharing our lives with other people and waiting to see whether or not they're going to like it.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. That's it. It used to be socially unacceptable. It was a joke, like, oh, they showed me their vacation slideshow. And now, like, every day it's like, welcome to my vacation slideshow.
I know, but it's that the enemy uses to really dig at us and go, my life is really not that big of a deal, and I'm really not doing anything that matters or that's going to have a lasting impact. And I think it's, I love how much you have shared in your book and in your study about how God does things in the things that we seem to think that are unimportant or small or even just homespun, like hanging out with your kids and having our arms out. Like my daughter and I, we both had the flu this last weekend. Actually, all of my kids did, but we were lying on the bed, both of us sick as dogs. And she leaned back against me. We're both feverish. Isn't this great to be together? I thought, well, this is not one of the memories I would treasure, but I did then. I could see it different. Yeah. Like that really just made a big impact for me. And it made me think about this study immediately. Yeah. All right, I'm going to move into the session 3 and talking about that, about a word fitly spoken and how our words matter. I love this quote from Anne Lamott: "Your stories are yours, and you're free to write them. If people wanted you to write warmly about them, they should have behaved better." That's one of my favorites.
The best. It's the best ever.
Okay, so God gives us our story. So why is it so valuable? Why is our story so valuable?
Because your story to me is uniquely yours. You're the only one that's living your story. And, I've heard it said that everybody has a book inside of them, at least one book. And I think it's so true because I think, it's funny to me, even as I've written my book, sometimes I'm like, is this interesting? Like there's nothing about this that everybody else in the world, everybody had grandparents, everybody has raised, people have raised babies, they've rocked them to sleep, they've done all that. But it's the way that you choose to tell your story. And I think sometimes to be authentic in that story with the struggles and the vulnerabilities and all of that can really minister to somebody else. You never know, just you admitting like this wasn't always easy. I felt like that was to me when I first became a mom. I was like, is this some sort of like pyramid scheme? Because this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And I didn't feel like anybody had really prepared me for how hard it is, but just to hear somebody else's stories and to start talking to my friends and to hear their stories of, yes, it's so hard. Like you don't feel like yourself for a year or whatever it is. There's just value in that. I mean, I think stories build community and they build relationships. And so I think our words are so important because I think God uses them in so many ways to impact the people around us.
Yeah, I think that you hit on that there, the issue of authenticity. When we're sharing who we are and our story, what's happened to us and the things we've done, authentically with other people, they can go, oh my gosh, like Me Too that's going around right now.
Yes.
Go ahead.
No, I was just thinking that same thing. I mean, I was like, that's such an example of like one woman comes forward and it makes it feel okay. It gives another woman the bravery to come forward. And sometimes that's all it takes is that like to be vulnerable in one authentic moment and say, I struggle with this too. And I feel like I've done that at, dinner tables with a group of girlfriends where we're all like, everything's good, life is great, it's all fine. And then one person decides to be real and then we're all like, blah, and we need that. Like that matters to people.
Yeah, it's the coming alongside and community and being able to say, especially for our sisters and brothers who are beyond us, who have been through it and are already have found healing or in a totally different stage of life, they can say, oh, baby, I promise you're going to get through this thing. And it's okay. You're going to survive it and you won't pull your hair out and it's going to be okay.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And we need that encouragement. We need those people cheering us on, and we need to be those people cheering other people on. You know, when we see somebody coming up behind us, to help each other. I mean, that's what we're there for.
Yeah. And I love that there are so many stories in the scripture as well that show us people's struggles and difficulties so that we can know that we're not the only Christian, we're not the only believer who is struggling with something and still wanting to remain faithful and walk through it in a way that honors God.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the Bible gives so many examples. And I think that's, you know, I had heard a sermon years ago, and it's funny with the Me Too movement going on right now, where it was like God always gives you a Me Too person, and how you look in the Bible and like you never see that God put somebody in something that he didn't give them another person to walk through it with them. And I think he believes so strongly in community and how much we need that support of those around us.
Yeah. Yes, and in session 4, you're talking about the broken pieces of life. And I
Mm-hmm.
know so many people who have gone through really, really unbelievably hard things. Some friends of ours just lost their son to leukemia yesterday morning, and he's not yet 4. And that's a totally life-changing thing. And you know that God's going to use that in their story,
Mm-hmm.
but it's devastating. So
Yeah.
in our Christian lives, we're all going to go through and find ourselves being shattered by life, sometimes really, really wrecked by life. So what do
Mm-hmm.
you say to somebody who's in that circumstance right now, like my friend who lost her son Lester yesterday morning, who's in that place of just devastation and brokenness? What would
Yeah.
you say?
You know, I think it's so hard because I think it takes time to heal. And I think there are things like that that you look and go, I don't know that you ever fully, you know, to me, it makes me think of a David Crowder song where it says, earth has no sorrow that heaven can't heal. And I think about that so much because I'm like, I think there are sorrows and griefs and losses that we have here that are so deep that until we are face to face with Jesus, I don't know that we'll ever feel completely healed of those, if that makes sense. But I also think that God promises to give us beauty for ashes, that he promises to comfort those that are mourning, that he promises that he'll restore the years that the locusts have eaten. And I think God looks at our losses, and I think he feels those so deeply for us. But there again, I feel like when we can trust him with those and say, God, this worst thing, this worst case scenario has happened to me, or I'm so broken, or these pieces of my life are so shattered, but I'm going to trust you to rebuild and to restore and to renew this in me. I absolutely believe that he'll be faithful to do that. And it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to have grief and tears and sorrow and all that, because it's just a reality to me of the world we live in. But it's there again when we can really trust him with those broken pieces. I do believe that he puts those back together. And I believe that where you have those little cracks that have kind of been glued back together that don't look perfect, it's like that's where his glory shines out, because that becomes your story to other people of, I've been, you know, to hell and back, you know, but yet God has carried me through that. And I still can find joy, and I can still live, and I can still get out of bed in the morning because I know that he's good.
That's absolutely so good. That's so right. Because Jesus is the one who really is the only one when our world is devastated, when we go through so much trauma. And even if we haven't gone through trauma yet, Jesus, as you say in your book, is the only thing that can really fill us up and
Yeah.
heal those broken places and give us
Mm-hmm.
kind of comfort. So for those of us who have small lives, as we do, what would you say to us about coming alongside somebody who is a neighbor or a friend or somebody in our church or community who is in that broken place? What can we do, and how can we be a good friend and neighbor?
To me, it's number one. I think sometimes people just want to be seen. I think people just want to know that, like, I see you and I see your hurt. And then it's figuring out, like, how do you, because I mean, we're all so unique. I mean, I'm more of an introverted personality. So don't throw me a party. Don't tell me you're taking me out to some big dinner. I just want, you know, a phone call to check on me, or a card that says I'm thinking about you, or a meal delivered at a time when, you know, I'm having a crazy week and things are really hard. It's just ways to show that person, like, I'm thinking about you, I love you, I care for you, and I'm here to listen. And I think sometimes we don't say anything because we're so scared of saying the wrong thing that I think we keep quiet, you know. And to me, I've learned, like, I lost one of my best friends to breast cancer about 1.5 years ago. And I think to me, just even now, if somebody just says, "Oh, I was so sorry to hear about Jen," I'm like, that's all you needed to say. You know, I just needed you to recognize that I've been going through that. And it's not that I need some big grand gesture. There again, it's a small thing. It's just recognizing, like, I see that you're in pain and I'm praying for you and I love you. And that's it. Sometimes that's the best thing that you can do.
Loving people that way and being loved that way is also leads straight into another major point of your book, which is we got to take care of our people and we've got to be with our people. We need to build our friendships and focus on friendships, and really that's part of how we grow and part of how we are bonded into our community is by having friends and being a friend, an authentic person. So tell us, what is your very favorite thing to do with your girlfriends?
Probably my very favorite thing, and I'm actually doing it tonight, so I'm super excited, is just to, like, go out for a fun dinner, like just to go out to a girls' dinner, because I feel like more than anything, I mean, I love to shop with my girlfriends and I love movie night with my girlfriends, but I like when we all get to sit down around a table and hear, like, real life, like, what's going on, what's bothering you right now, what are you loving right now, what beauty products are you using right now, just all of it, like, where we're all talking so fast and we're so excited to be together. And, you know, I think it's hard to schedule that time. Like, we laughed because there's a group of 6 of us that used to get together at least once a month. And as our kids have gotten older, and it's just nights are so much crazier now, but I'm like, we will all leave there feeling so refreshed and restored and dialed in, and it'll make us ultimately better wives and moms because we got that time. So I just think it's figuring out what works in your schedule. You know, can you do a girls' movie night? Can you just go to lunch with a friend? I mean, my best friend and I commit to every Tuesday, pretty much without fail, we go to lunch. It's like a standing lunch date, and we really don't break it because we know that we need that time.
Gosh, we absolutely do. And any time that we get together with our girlfriends, and it includes prayer, laughter, and potentially tears, is a great night. It's a great time together, a great lunch together.
Yeah.
It really does shape us as people and shape who we are. You know, I wanted to ask you, who is it that you really think needs this study? I mean, if you're saying, okay, what person would you say, okay, if you're in this situation or that situation, you really need to go through this study? Who needs to be here?
You know, to me, and this is like, I think everybody needs this study, but I do feel like for women, you know, anywhere, to me, from as young as like 18 all the way up to, I don't know, in your 70s or 80s, I feel like there's something to benefit, because I do feel like 99.5% of us live in the small spaces. I mean, it's just, I mean, there are the people that are on platforms and have huge stages and do these things, but that is not the norm. You know, most of us are just where we are, and just recognizing that, like, there are needs everywhere, that when we look, there are so many ways that we can dial into our community, into our small groups, and join a book club or be part of the PTO or whatever that is. You know, I just think we need that encouragement. And I think even for older women, like, even if you're past the season of raising kids and all that stuff, like, we need you, you know, like, you're not done yet. Like, we need you to tell us, like, this is how you survive. This is how you get through. This is what can happen. And so I just think for all of us, there's a lesson that God has for us in the small places of our lives and what he does with those.
I was just talking about this with my mama last night at dinner, and she's in her 60s and a widow, and she's done her whole life, and she's done all of the, you know, business and building a church and building a family and being married for almost 50 years, that kind of thing, before my dad passed away, and just saying, you know, hey, you've got whatever these years are left, and it might seem like it's a small thing, but there's so much left still to offer. So I love that you just said that, because I'm in the same zone with wanting to reach out to people and saying, you know, come do this study with us, because it's you. All of us who have quiet, simple, mundane, homespun lives, we're all in this, and it doesn't matter what season we're in. We're all in it. You You guys, our study, I can't wait, starts October 22nd. We've got 6 sessions that are called Being Faithful in the Small Things, Created for a Reason, A Word Fitly Spoken, Broken Pieces, Investing in Friendships, and Bigger Than You Imagine. Be sure that you join our private Facebook group, because that's where you can really, if you're doing this by yourself, don't worry, I am too. You can join our private Facebook group and make friendships there and build community and go through the study and ask questions, and it's going to be great. Also, be sure to go to store.faithgateway.com to get your materials for our study. With the coupon code Small Things, you can get $4 off the book, the study guide, and the DVD. Melanie, thank you so much for this time together. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with us?
I just want to say, I really hope y'all enjoy the study. I hope you dig into it. I prayed over this. Writing a Bible study was never something that was on my radar. So I really feel like these are the words and the message that God put on my heart that I just believe in so strongly. So I just hope that you'll be encouraged by it. I hope that you'll be inspired by it. And I just hope that God meets you wherever you are in your life as you go through the study.
Thank you so much. This was really an excellent time. And you guys, we are so excited to start this study together. So God bless you and thanks.